The Illuminati formula used to create an undetectable total mind-controlled slave. A distilled overview of the original text, inspired by the ForbiddenKnowledge.com by Cisco Wheeler and FRITZ. SPRINGMEIER. You may freely share this document. Introduction. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:32. Here is a remarkable and powerful book. Save it, copy it, give it to friends and therapists for compassionate work. You now have in your hands the very tools that can deprogram the dream. Once you know this, and you absorb its implications, you can no longer be blindfolded. By reading this, you may be helping millions of monarch slaves. These techniques only work by our ignorance of knowing them. Herein, let us apply the heart to the mind, and awaken a middle way, by infiltrating another piece of the cancer of sleep. As all is God in action. Dedication. This book is dedicated to the 2 million Americans and counting who have been programmed with monarch-type trauma-based mind control. This book is written to destroy trauma-based mind control before it destroys the human race. It's time for this horrendous secret to end. Blood, sweat and tears are associated with this book. The blood of the innocent victims of this mind control cries out in a single unison, along with the pungent sweat of those who have tried to minister help to the shattered humanity left by the sadistic programmers, and the pools of tears shed as this book was written. How long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not judge and avenge our blood on earth? Warning, read this first before reading the book. If there is any chance you the reader have had mind control done to you, you must consider the following book to be dangerous. If you are consulting a therapist for DID, also known as MPD, it is recommended that you consult your therapist before reading this book. The complications that could result for those under mind control learning the truth could be fatal. The co-authors take no responsibility for those who read or misuse this information. The reader's mind is like a garden. It may not be time to plant the truth in your mind. Perhaps you need some weeding or ground preparation before the garden of your mind is ready. Perhaps the weather is too stormy to plant the truth. The blessings that flow from planting the information of this book in your mind will require the presence of living waters of love. If you do not have love in your heart, this book is not for you. The information contained in this book is the biggest news story of the 20th century, and still the biggest secret. It will challenge you, shock you, horrify you and hopefully motivate you to redouble your efforts to humble yourself and seek strength from God. The programming procedures which are described in this book are based on research and consultation with deprogrammers, ex-programmers, therapists, counselors and pertinent literature. To the best of our knowledge, the statements made in this book are factual, although they may not reflect the latest or currently accepted methodology among each and every faction of the New World Order which carries out monarch-type programming. This book tends to devote more emphasis to Illuminati programming, which is the highest level of programming. For individual application and understanding a survivor of monarch programming, therapists are admonished to use this material with consideration for the monarch victim's personal case and situation. The authors disclaim any responsibility for therapeutic work based upon this material. FRITZ, SPRINGMEIER and Cisco Wheeler have co-authored They Know Not What They Do, an illustrated guidebook to monarch mind control. Both FRITZ and Cisco bring years of experience in dealing with monarch programming to bear on the writing of this book. FRITZ has researched the Illuminati, while he has worked with victims of its programming. He has authored the top 13 Illuminati families, and several other books. Introduction by FRITZ. There are many dangers to the human race, some real and some imagined. I believe that the trauma-based mind control which this book exposes is the greatest danger to the human race. It gives evil men the power to carry out any evil deed totally undetected. By the time the astute reader finishes this book, they will be as familiar with how to carry out trauma-based mind control as some of the programmers. Ancient and more recent secrets will no longer be secrets. Over the years, I have spent thousands of hours studying the Illuminati, the intelligence agencies of the world, and the occult world in general. The centerpiece of these organizations is the trauma-based mind control that they carry out. Without the ability to carry out this sophisticated type of mind control using MPD, drugs, hypnosis and electronics and other control methodologies, these organizations would fail to keep their dark evil deeds secret. When one of the mind control programmers of the Church of Scientology, who has left Scientology, was asked about MPD, he said, "It's the name of the game of mind control. Research into this subject will never be complete." This book has tried to give a comprehensive view of how the programming is done. The basic techniques were developed in German, Scottish, Italian, and English Illuminati families and have been done for centuries. Some report that some of the techniques go back to ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon to the ancient mystery religions. The Nazis are known to have studied ancient Egyptian texts in their mind control research. The records and secrets of the generational Illuminati bloodlines are very well guarded secrets. Even when I've learned about the location of secret depositories of some of the Illuminati's secrets in Europe, America, and Asia, their records and secrets are too well guarded to be examined. The intelligence agencies, such as MI6, began investigating these mind control techniques early this century, but their records have been routinely destroyed and tampered with. There are some survivors and professionals who know that the British used programmed trauma-based MPD, DID, agents in WWI in January 1987. Richard Clough submitted an article to the American Journal of Clinical Hypnosis about 8 MPD patients who were between 60 and 72 years of age. Traugott Konstantin Oesterreich, 1880 to 1949, who was professor of philosophy 5 at Tübingen University, Germany, studied MPD and demonic possession and wrote a classic study of it in 1921 entitled Possession Demonical and Other, which was translated into English in 1930. His classic work on this subject provides documented cases which reveal that the basic trauma-based mind control was going on in Germany, France and Belgium long before the 20th century. Although he is unable to put together all the pieces and the clues for what they are, the reader of this book might enjoy reading the 1930 English translation of his classic work after they finish this book. Oesterreich's research in early 1900s was the type of research that the Nazi mind control programmers were very aware of. In 1921, the Germans such as Oesterreich would describe personality switches by the term somnambuliform, hypnotic states, possession or demonical somnambulism, or what might be called Besessenheit von Hypnotismus und Bosengestern. The ability to study both the spiritual and psychological aspects of mind control phenomena is often lacking today. There are exceptions such as Dr. Loretta Fox's book The Spiritual Dimensions of MPD. In the 1920s, the Germans also were aware that the human mind has a variety of ego-psychophysiological states rather than one unified mind, which they termed subject-closed psychology, or the psychology of having correlated psychological states rather than the concept of a single ego. The Germans and Italians under the Nazi and fascist governments began to do serious scientific research into trauma-based mind control. Under the auspices of the Kaiser Wilhelm Medical Institute in Berlin, Joseph Mengele conducted mind control research on thousands of twins and thousands of other hapless victims. Himmler supervised genetic research. The Nazi research records were confiscated by the Allies and are still classified. A trip can be made from downtown Washington, D.C. on a gray government van which serves as a shuttle to the Sutherland Annex, where the government's secrets are buried, including research papers captured from the Nazi mind control research. Most of Mengele's concentration camp research is still classified. Much of it dealt with mind control. A researcher can visit the top floor, but underground below the top floor are the real secrets. The real secrets are lying in millions of sheets of classified documents hidden behind blast-proof doors. There they have vault after vault, and row after row of top-secret files that only a few privileged persons with security clearances above cosmic, such as with a C3 or MJ security clearance, can visit. Everyone with these high security clearances which I have identified is connected to the Illuminati. Each underground area at Sutherland Annex has its own subset of secret access words, known only to the initiated. Most of the OS records have been destroyed, a few have been left, the important ones have been misfiled or remade. This is according to a reliable British intelligence agent. Also according to reliable inside sources, the CIA is working night and day to remake old records, to expunge all the real dirty secrets from their records. The basement of CIA HQ is known as the pit. In the pit, documents are being shredded and burned on a round-the-clock basis. The large remains of these secrets are sold for landfill. The Illuminati have developed secrecy to a fine art. They train their people in the art of secrecy from the time they are born. Most everything they do is done orally. They are trained not to write rituals and other things down. There is very little paper trail left by the Illuminati. The creation of slaves with photographic memories facilitates this secrecy. But this book is not about how they have managed to keep their trauma-based monarch mind control a secret. They have managed only to keep it a secret to the general public. They have not been able to completely cover up the millions of wasted lives that their programming has ruined. For many years, they were able to shut up and quietly discard their programmed multiples by labeling them paranoid schizophrenics. But therapists are now correctly identifying these people as programmed multiples and are not only diagnosing them better but giving them better treatment. After Candy Jones's husband deprogrammed her enough that she could participate in writing a book exposing some of what had been done to her, the secret was out. See The Control of Candy Jones' Hypnotism in the CIA by Donald Bain. Ever since then, the intelligence agencies and the Illuminati have been carrying out damage control. Their biggest damage control campaign has enlisted the power of Hollywood and the controlled media. This campaign is known as the False Memory Syndrome campaign, or as those of us who know the facts like to call it the False Memory Syndrome. The headquarters of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation is located at 3401 Market Street, Suite 130, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19104. Some of the original founders were doctors of the University of Pennsylvania. The inside story about these early FMS doctors of the University of Pennsylvania is that they practiced satanic rituals during their workdays. What is unusual about this is that generally satanic rituals are performed at night, but these doctors did their carbon work during the day. I know about these men. Now you can see why these men started the FMS. They started it to cover their own sins, because many of them were abusers themselves. In other words, many of the M's people are abusers of trauma-based mind-controlled slaves, or the victims of abuse who are in denial about their own abuse from trauma-based mind control. Martin T. Orne, the person credited with founding the FMS, had ties to the CIA. Two members of the M's advisory board, Ralph Underwood, Ph.D. and theologian, along with Holiday Wakefield, M.A. let the cat out of the bag when they publicly supported pedophilia, that is adults having sex with children. Their support of pedophilia came in an interview with a Dutch magazine Petica, the Journal of Pedophilia, Winter, 1993. Although the false memory syndrome foundation gets upset at any mention that there might be a conspiracy by the perpetrators of mind control, because conspiracies supposedly don't and can't happen. They want us to believe that all therapists are conspiring together to implant false memories of abuse into their clients, which could not be further from the truth. Monarch slaves typically run into a great deal of denial by their therapists that anything like this could be happening. The bottom line is that multiple personality disorder, now referred to as dissociative identity disorder, is a recognized bona fide diagnosis. False memory syndrome is not a recognized medical or psychological diagnosis and does not appear in the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 3R nor the recently released DSM-IV-8. Those who followed Fritz's writings have learned about the close working relationship between the Mondevis and the Rothschilds. See his article about the Mondevi-Rothschild Napa Valley Winery. Guess who got the court precedence which gives the M some legal ground to attack therapists? The precedence was supposedly a wife who went to a doctor who told her she had syphilis. The wife assumes she got it from her husband and divorces him. Then she learns she doesn't have syphilis. The husband then sues the doctor. Upon this bizarre case rests the legal precedence for a third party to sue a person who gives advice, such as family members suing a therapist. Upon this weak precedence, an abusive father who worked for Monday in a winery in California successfully destroyed a legitimate therapist who was trying to save his daughter who was a programmed monarch victim. Supposedly the therapist had implanted false memories of rape in his daughter, when the record shows that the daughter's mother told the therapist a girl had been raped by the father. When a valid case of SRA and repressed memories went to trial in Washington state involving a police officer whose family was MPD, Dr. Richard Offshee of the false memory syndrome showed up to cause mischief. And mischief he did work. The case involved the children of a Christian police officer named Ingram who had satanically ritually abused his family for years. The daughter won in court, but Offshee of the M's was not above writing a book full of lies and distortions about the case. Lynn Crook, who was the abused daughter in the case, wrote up a paper exposing what M's person Richard Offshee did to her. The controlled media is giving full license and great coverage to the M's people, rather than fighting the government for scraps of declassified documents which have had their secrets marked out, and which may even be fake documents manufactured by the CIA. I have decided that there is a much better approach to expose the monarch mind control to the world. If a person could never go to Nepal, he can see pictures of it and believe it exists. If a person cannot get into the top secret records of the CIA and Office of Naval Intelligence and MI6, they can be given the exact recipe for creating a 9-monarch slave. I believe that by giving the step-by-step recipe, people will see that A, all the ingredients are available, B, it is possible to combine the ingredients, C, all it takes is the motive to do it, and that motive is self-evident. We'll even provide some of the names and places as we go along. This book will provide the step-by-step recipe for making a monarch mind-controlled slave. It is a trauma-based mind control which programs multiple personalities using every known technique of mind control. Every type of mind control technique has been combined into a group package which makes the total package almost impossible to break. It is this ability to synthesize all these methods into a group package which is so powerful. Edward Hunter, author of Brainwashing in Red China, testified in 1958 before a U.S. Congressional House Committee on Un-American Activities. Since man began, he has tried to influence other men or women to his way of thinking. There have always been these forms of pressure to change attitudes. We discovered in the past 30 years, a technique to influence, by clinical, hospital procedures, the thinking processes of human beings. Brainwashing is formed out of a set of different elements: hunger, fatigue, tenseness, threats, violence, and in more intense cases, drugs and hypnotism. No one of these elements alone can be regarded as brainwashing, any more than an apple can be called apple pie. Other ingredients have to be added, and a cooking process gone through. So it is with brainwashing. Hunter said brainwashing was a red Chinese threat. He said that the Chinese were the ones using these tactics. In reality, this mind control was being done in the US, and Hunter was a pawn to help justify the criminal activities of the programmers should they ever be found out behind their cover of national security. The handlers of mind controlled slaves carry around a black or gray 3-ring notebook or a laptop computer with the access codes and triggers. Some of the programmers and handlers have this all memorized. The deepest parts, Core Gems Executive Committee, False Trinity etc. are charted in esoteric language such as Enochian, Hebrew, which is considered magical, and 10 Druid symbols. I have never gotten the opportunity to look at one of these, although a number of the slaves who I've talked with have while they were being programmed. These notebooks have color-coded graphs showing the arrangement of altars, the structure of the system, the training of the altars, the history of the altars and other details. All the primary tortures carried out on a slave are coded using dates no S so that the memories can be pulled up by the programmers. There is a standard set of hand signals, gestures, and codes that allow a handler to work with someone else's slave, but the accepted code among the handlers is to leave another man's slave alone. As one leading psychiatrist put it, different ideologies use the same methodologies of mind control. The Illuminati have secretly put in base programming that allows them ultimate control over many of the other group's slaves. This will be described within this book. For both the ease of reading and the ease of writing, I have dispensed with most footnotes. to provide my sources with double the size of the book, and many of them are confidential. In the past, when I have attempted crediting information, some people have gotten bruised feelings for having been passed over or for being named. When information comes in from several sources, it becomes difficult to pass out credit. I have made conservative judgment calls about what material I could use. Most of this information has been verified by several reliable sources. Confidential eyewitnesses are often the only source when there is such a powerful conspiracy to keep this vast NWO mind control secret. Paper trails were not left or are not available. Programmed slaves who have worked for the military as mind-controlled slaves have witnessed their files expunged and sanitized. The New World Order in 1981 made training films for their novice programmers. Monarch slave Kathy O'Brien was used to make both the film How to Divide a Personality and How to Create a Sex Slave. Two Huntsville porn photographers were used to help NASA and the NWO create these training films. Undoubtedly, other porn training films exist too. In other words, there is film evidence of the Monarch total mind control, but these porn films are kept in very secure sites. 11. During the last few years, I have visited with ex-programmers. I have visited with hundreds of victims of the Monarch type programming. I have gone to programming sites. I have visited with therapists who work with the victims of this mind control. And I have met several of the programmers of the CIA Illuminati face to face in the adventures of trying to save people from their programming. I hope that God gives me the strength and the opportunity to get the information I have learned out to the world in general. When this information gets out, hopefully it will help lift some of the secrecy of the Monarch programming. The Monarch programming is a foundation rock of the New World Order that when pulled up, will reveal the most evil two-legged bugs and slimy critters. When their rock is lifted, they will have to scurry to hide. Because the authors know what the programmers do, they must honestly record several areas of programming that will be controversial. The programmers are very much into demonology. Before therapists close their minds to this subject, the authors would like to point out that they personally know of cases where Monarch slaves whose Christian personalities and other alters didn't believe in demonology were talked into participating in real deliverance, and the slaves discovered much to their surprise that work they had unsuccessfully tried to do for years with their therapist was accomplished in a day or two. Some prestigious researchers have decided the subconscious doesn't exist because they can't find it. It's mysterious. To the man in the street, the concept subconscious is as mysterious as the concept demon. Both have been the objects of intense research by US, Brit, JAR, intelligence groups. In fact, many of the concepts in this book have been purposely obscured by the Illuminati's control over the media and universities. These obscured concepts include MPD, recovered memories, hypnosis, demonic possession, aliens, mind control, the subconscious, a conspiracy to bring in a NWO, truth, etc. The smokescreens of controversy will continue, but those who love the truth, if they seek it, will realize the importance of this book. It's on public record that MKUltra, the mind control research which CIA Director Admiral Stansfield Turner admitted to in 1977, spent millions of dollars 12 studying voodoo, witchcraft, and psychics. On August 3, 1977, at a Senate hearing, the then CIA Director Admiral Stansfield Turner disclosed that the CIA had been conducting mind control on countless numbers of unsuspecting victims for years, without their knowledge or consent. These CIA mind control operations were carried out with the participation of at least 185 scientists and at least 80 American institutions, including prisons, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and 44 medical colleges and universities. Many of America's most prestigious institutes of medical research had cooperated with the CIA, as well as numerous big-name corporations. Casey admitted that day that the CIA did mind control consisting of drugs, hypnosis, and electroshock. A few of the victims of the Monarch Project were even awarded financial compensation for their misery. But what was admitted in the spirit of covering up the extent of the full truth. The compensation was actually hush money, because victims were given gag orders by judges not to talk about what had happened to them. For Christian deprogrammers, it's been a disaster for Monarch victims that so many ministers have ignored those words of their scripture, for we are not ignorant of the devil's devices. 2 Cor 2. 11. This book is a must for those ministers who seriously believe, having therefore these promises. Dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. 2 Cor 7. 1. In 2 Tim 2, 1921, believers who name at the name of Christ are asked to purge themselves of their uncleanliness, unclean spirits. There are many top-notch Christians in the churches today who are under mind control, including many of the Christian leadership. Ignorance is not godliness. One of the character traits of God is that he is all-knowing. WHO says it is godly to be ignorant. The prophet Daniel said God reveals the deep and secret things. Dan 2:22. Jesus' advice to his disciples was in effect to be wise as serpents, and gentle as a lamb. 13. This advice certainly applies in helping the victims of trauma-based mind control. Paul, in his letter to the Thessalonians, 1:5-14, says that in effect that different people need different counseling, but they all need to be treated with patience. The first step in suggesting a cure is to find out what happened. That is what this book is about. This book is about how the occult network creates the problem that therapists and a few ministers try to deal with. but the keys to open doors to healthy solutions for the victims of trauma-based total mind control will reveal themselves in this book for the reader, as this book reveals the nitty-gritty of how the total mind control happens. Satanic ritual abuse has a history that is almost as old as history itself. Good King Hezekiah was a victim as a child of SRA 2CHR29, who got free. Moses confronted the satanic magic of Pharaoh's magicians who could create live snakes from sticks. The Apostle Paul had to deal with Simon Magus, a leader of what is now known as Satanism. Solomon, one of the greatest men of faith, backslid and became one of the greatest Satanists of all history. We have no fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness, but rather approve them, as per F 5:11. While we have no fellowship with evil, the mind control programmers are counting on us being so ignorant of their devices that they can hide their control devices behind perversion and filth that many people shy away from. We must be strong enough to face evil and not shy away from it. The victims of mind control must look evil in the face and not look away to gain their freedom. We, who want to help them, must be courageous and strong enough to do this too. This book is written for that divine goal till we all come in the unity of the faith, and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto a measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. F 4:13. If the body of Christ is to attain fullness, we need this book to weed out the hidden terrible cancer that is consuming the body from within. This book is written for ministers, secular and Christian therapists, and truth lovers of all kinds. If you love the truth, this book is for you. If you see something good in the human race so that our species should be preserved as well as the spotted owl and the sand flea, then this book is for you. If you love the truth, this book is for you. 14. Glossary of how basic terms are used in this book. For those readers who are not familiar with these basic terms, let us introduce you to the definitions under which this book uses them. Alter. Our usage is trying to follow the programmer's usage of this word, a dissociated part of the mind which has a separate identity and is given cue codes by the mind control programmers to trigger that dissociated part of the mind to come to the front of the mind. The alter's identity may be a gem, rock, a tape recorder, a poodle, a white kitten, a dove, a horse, or even think of itself as a person or a demon. It all depends on its programming. An alter is different from an alter fragment in that the alter fragment is a dissociated part of the mind which serves only a single purpose. The programmers will give an alter a history, and ensure that shadow alters will provide a full range of accessible emotions. Sometimes the distinctions between alters and alter fragments is vague, but examples from the two ends of the spectrum are easy to tell apart. We use the word alter in this book to conform to what the programmer's charts are encoding as alters. A typical main Mendele created grid would be a grid of 13x13 principal A-coded alters, which is 169 principal alter personalities. In Illuminati systems, ceremonial altars will consist of 3 altars placed on a spinning pedestal together into triad goddesses or gods. That means that an A-coded altar on some levels is actually 3 altars spinning together, which must be locked in place to communicate with, and then rotated to communicate to the other 2. Beta. This is the second Greek letter, and it represents the sexual models and sexual altars that the programmers are creating. The primitive part of the brain is involved in this type of programming. An early sexual abuse event will be used to anchor this programming. These sexual slaves will develop sexual abilities that are far beyond what the public is aware is even possible. They also receive the worst kind of abuse far beyond what most people's imagination can picture. Beta alters generally see themselves as Catch 15. Councils. Illuminati. The Illuminati has frequent meetings. Some of these meetings are organized to appear acephalous and accidental in their meetings, when in reality they are structured and planned. One group, MJ12, has gone by the following names: the group, the Special Study Group, the Wise Men, the Operations Coordinating Board, OCB, 5412 Committee, 303 Committee, 40 Committee, Pi 40 Committee, and Policy Planning Group, PCG. Some of the formal policy and ritual groups have names that all Illuminati members who have gotten high enough to learn will recognize: the Council of 3, Council of 5, Council of 7, Council of 9, the Grand Druid Council, the Committee of 300, and the Committee of 500, known as Fortune 500. Many of the meetings are conclaves without formal names. The Grand Druid Council is not something fictional, but an actual body of people who formally meet and whose membership we have been trying to keep track of. The groups which make decisions to control this planet are networked together. Each decision has its own origin and route that it takes. Delta. This is a Greek letter shaped like a triangle which symbolizes change in calculus. It has become a favorite word to use in naming things for the occult elite. Delta teams are 4-person assassination teams which usually are secret teams. Delta Forces is an elite unit that operates under the Joint Chiefs of Staff that is made up of highly trained total mind-controlled slaves. Delta models are slaves whose sole purpose is assassination. Delta alters are alters within an Illuminati alter system which are programmed to be assassins. These alters are often some of the deepest in a system and in a genie bottle or with umbrella programming. Deliverance Ministry. This book is about how the mind control is done. It is not a textbook on solutions. The use of the term deliverance ministry in this book connotates any person, who via faith in God is able to pray for divine help in a fashion. 16. That a victim is helped from demonic activity. A deliverance ministry is a natural outgrowth of a life in harmony and fellowship with God. However, this is not to be confused with exorcism of the traditional Catholic or witchcraft nature, in which certain spells and incantations are used in a prescribed method. Deliverance connotes divinely inspired faith. Exorcism involves ritual. A deliverance ministry might perhaps teach a person about forgiveness, or how they can renounce an oath, or how to apply Jesus Christ's atoning blood to their life. In this fashion, the person finds deliverance through biblical spiritual principles rather than the efficacy of some ritual or hocus-pocus spell. This book is in no way meant as a blanket endorsement of every spiritual warfare tactic. If anything, this book suggests that ministers learn more about mind control, as well as grow stronger in their walk with God. Illuminati. The Illuminati are 13 elite bloodlines which have maneuvered themselves into control over this planet. They led double lives, one for society and a hidden one which is based on a Gnostic Luciferian philosophy which consists of lots of blood rituals. Monarch programming. This was a specific project carried out by secret elements of the US government and intelligence groups. There were, according to someone a few years ago who had access to the computer, which contains all the names of active monitored human slaves, 40,000 actively monitored monarch slaves. However, this book uses the term generically to include all victims who have suffered this type of trauma-based mind control. In the same way that a brand name like Hister is used to describe all lifts, when we use the term we use it in its broadest sense. This is the only way it can be used and technically correct, because as of this date, the authors have not seen who is on the active monarch program list of slaves. System. This term is used in several ways. It is frequently used to refer to a victim of 17. Total mind control because the victim consists of alters, programming, implant, internal computers, and numerous dissociative states which function together as a system. The word is also used in this book to refer to the body's functional physiological units, such as the respiratory system. The word is also infrequently used to denote the established social, economic, political system controlling the world, also known insiders as the network. Other standard meaning may also occasionally be used for the word. Multiple personality disorder. Dissociative identity disorder. Dissociative identity disorder is the situation where different dissociative parts of a single brain view themselves as separate persons. The DSM-IV definition of multiple personality disorder (MPD) is the guideline for determining MPD for this book. New World Order. The New World Order is the global design for a one-world government, one-world dictator and its constituents. Insiders call themselves the network and the neighborhood. Satanic ritual abuse, SRA. This is used to represent all categories of ritual abuse which would be inspired by the desire to rob, kill, or destroy something worthwhile in a person, especially their freedom of thought. Many groups carrying out SRA do not mention Satan by that name. They may make pacts to Baphomet, and call upon Rex Mundi, or Belair, or Lucifer, or the Father of Light, God, or Kali, or even Jesus or Jesus Christ. SRA is not a value judgment by the authors against some group. The victims themselves on some level know that he or she is being abused. Switching. This is when one part, fragment, of the mind takes over from another, or in simple terms, this is when one alter personality or alter fragment takes the body from the alter which is holding the body. 18. Switching can occur via the programmer's codes for calling up alters, or by external or internal stimuli that trigger an alter to come out. Switching will usually cause at least a flicker of the eyes, and for outside observers, who know the different personalities, they will observe another personality take the body. 19. Chapter 1. Science. Number 1. The selection and preparation of the victim. A selection based on genetics and dissociative abilities. B. Availability. C. Mental and physical features. One of the primary reasons that the monarch mind control programming was named monarch programming was because of the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterfly learns where it was born, its roots, and it passes this knowledge via genetics onto its offspring, from generation to generation. This was one of the key animals that tipped scientists off. That knowledge can be passed genetically. The monarch program is based upon Illuminati and Nazi goals to create a master race in part through genetics. If knowledge can be passed genetically, which it is, then it is important that parents be found that can pass the correct knowledge onto those victims selected for the monarch mind control. The primary important factor for the trauma-based mind control is the ability to disassociate. It was discovered that this ability is passed genetically from generation to generation. American Indian tribes, who had traumatic ritual dances and who would wait motionless for hours when hunting, children of fakirs in India, who would sleep on a bed of nails or walk on hot coals, children of yogis, those skilled in yoga, who would have total control over their body in trance, Tibetan Buddhists, children of Madown, Bizango and other groups have a good ability to disassociate. The children of multi-generational abuse are also good at dissociation. The Illuminati families and European occultists went to India and Tibet to study occultism and Eastern philosophy. These Europeans learned yoga, tantric yoga, meditations, and trances and other methods to disassociate. 20. These skills are passed on to their children via genetics. A test is run when the children are about 18 months old to determine if they can dissociate enough to be selected for programming or not. Mind-controlled slaves are created for different purposes, hierarchy or non-hierarchy purposes. The Illuminati create mind-controlled slaves who are to function within the Illuminati hierarchy. These slaves will usually have their genealogies hidden, and will be created to have excellent cover lives to ensure that they are not detected. They will be given multifunctional programming, and will usually be used to help program other slaves. The abuse will not be as physically visible as it will be on the bodies of slaves who are not born to be part of the Illuminati elite. Members of Moreeeeeee equals the Illuminati, Luciferian elite will have undergone as much trauma as other slaves. However, the torture scars and the control are better concealed. These children will often receive lavish experiences as well as talks to convince them that they are part of the elite. By the way, body scars will show up better under black light. That is the same black light as used in clubs. The Illuminati and other organizations have also programmed individuals who are simply expendable. These are sex slaves who are used up and killed very early in life, one-time use saboteurs, breeders, soldiers, drug couriers and so forth. The bodies of these people will often show visible torture scars. The expendable are the children of parents who were blackmailed into turning their children over to the CIA. This is all hidden by the power of the National Security Act. These are children who have been sold by pedophile fathers or pornographic parents. The programmer's masters program them with the expectation that they will be thrown from the freedom train when they get to age 30. Freedom train is the code word for the monarch trauma-based mind control. To be thrown from the freedom train means to be killed. The CIA and the Illuminati are skilled at blackmailing parents to give up their children. They would watch the mail for porn. Pedophile and murderers who 21 abuse their children are warned that they will go to prison for long lengths of time if they do not cooperate by selling their children into mind-controlled slavery. In return for the parents' cooperation, they provide rich financial rewards to the parent. It's clearly a case of if you don't cooperate you lose in life big time, if you do cooperate you win big time. Ministers are often set up with betas, a sexual model who then blackmailed them. The ministers do not want to lose their status and profession via scandals, so they agree to turn their children over when young to the CIA to work with. The Illuminati like to blackmail these ministers when they are finished with their seminary schooling and committed to the ministry at about 33 years of age. The idea of having nothing to fall back on after they have committed their entire life to one profession is too much for these weak-willed men, and they buckle under the threats. If they don't buckle under, the resulting consequences will remove them from ministry. The type of father who is most preferred by the programmers to offer up their children for programming is the pedophile. If a father will abuse his own little baby girl, then the programmers know that the man has no conscience. This father's involvement in criminal activity, and thereby his vulnerability, can be continually increased. They want men who they believe will not develop any qualms later on in life about what they have done. A man who waits until his daughter is a teenager to molest her is usually esteemed to have too much conscience for the programmers. A big distinction must be made between hierarchy monarch slaves and non-hierarchy monarch slaves. The reason there is such a big distinction is that they are not programmed the same way. Since this book is giving the recipe for how to create a monarch slave, we will have to cover the distinction between slaves within the Illuminati and those slaves who function outside of the Illuminati hierarchy. It is important to stress that the label monarch is used in this book in a generic sense for the modern trauma-based total mind control that is taking place. Whether an Illuminati mind-controlled slave is technically in the Monarch 22 records or out of the actual Monarch program data files kept on computer is merely a technicality. In my, Fritz's, other writings, I explain about how the Illuminati created the CIA. I know that some of its directors were members of the Illuminati and I strongly suspect that the other CIA directors were probably full-fledged members too. The two organizations need each other. If the CIA didn't have the international backing of the movers and shakers of the world, it would have been exposed and done away with. Likewise, the Illuminati, because it is so secret, needs organizations through which it can work. The CIA is a front for the Illuminati, and the CIA in turn sets up fronts. Some of those fronts are elaborate, well-staffed, well-equipped programming sites, such as many of the state mental hospitals, McGill Psychiatric Training Network consisting of 8 Montreal hospitals especially, St. Mary's, NASA in Huntsville, the Presidia, CA, and Knott's at China Lake, CA, to name a few. For a more complete list see Appendix B, the Illuminati couldn't do it alone without its fronts. Satanists within the network and the CIA took over Boys Town, NE in the early 1950s, and used that famous orphanage for a constant supply of boys for programming. Boys Town is perhaps the most famous, but there are a whole long list of others. When the Monarch programming started, the top men were Illuminati. Originally, Joseph Mengele was the lead programmer. He had already achieved the rank of Grand Master, later Oximus, within the Illuminati. He had become skilled in music, in Kabbalistic magic, in dancing, in abortions, and in torture. By the way, Mengele had a sadistic mother, and programming children. Many of the concentration camp children that Mengele programmed still survive and still love him to this day as daddy. Mengele disappeared from Auschwitz in January 1945, several months before the final chaos began in the Third Reich. He disappeared so the Illuminati could smuggle him to the US, so that his exceptional knowledge of programming, honed and fine-tuned on thousands of concentration camp child victims, could be put to use on a grand scale in the US. He traveled worldwide but especially in western US doing his programming accompanied by his pair of 2 black servants. 23. American monarch survivors remember his spotless German uniform, his shiny boots which he wore during programming, his thick German accent, his handsome features, his cleft chin, the space in his front teeth, the way he would jab with his thumb while programming, as if he were still saying links, retched to lines of Jews coming into the concentration camps. The reason Mengele was so excited to do the selection process of inmates coming into Auschwitz was that he was choosing inmates for his numerous mind-controlled trauma experiments. He was especially anxious to get identical twins, because his genetic research related to mind control needed persons of identical genetic makeup. Traditionally, the Illuminati had been having their children inspected by a woman with the rank of Grande Mother. She would determine the fitness of the children and then present them for a formal acceptance ceremony at age 3 to the Grande Druid Council. This procedure didn't change when Mengele came over. The programming just jumped from being an occult science to one that had full access to the medical, psychiatric, judicial, scientific and governmental sectors via the power of the National Security Act and the intelligence agencies. The Illuminati's programming of multiples prior to Mengele's arrival were simplistic, compared to the sophisticated techniques engineered by the Nazi Germans, whose mind control research included some non-German nationals such as some Italians. Just as a victim who is killed by an 18th century musket is just as much victimized as someone killed by an M16, so a victim of the pre-1946 programming was just as victimized as those programmed with more sophisticated techniques. For the Illuminati, the child's programming is planned by the Circle, another name for their organization, before it is born. From the Illuminati's perspective, their plans involve generational spirits and positions within the hierarchy. The child is conceived according to their rituals, and the steps that child will go through follows a well-thought-out detailed regimen for programming it. In contrast, the children from foster homes, or pedophiles do not receive the same regimen. Hierarchy slaves will in turn be used to program and train other hierarchy 24 children, while CIA slaves and mafia slaves and KKK slaves etc. will be discarded. This is why a presidential model is thrown from the Freedom Train, the name of the monarch program in the underworld. Women and men in the Illuminati will continue to help with the programming their entire lives. The Illuminati is programming such vast numbers of children, they need every one of their able members to help. Mariah's total membership worldwide numbers in the millions. The Illuminati regimen for their children is far more controlling than the CIA's programming. Not everyone in the Illuminati gets their mind split and becomes a programmed multiple. However, everyone does get some type of mind control. Those who have been spared multiplicity still must participate in a 2-week intense mind control session that might be compared to the Army's Ranger School. Those who participate in this have learned obedience. Those who haven't learned obedience are forced into ritual gladiator-type duels or other punishments to eliminate them. Finally, a traitor's death was pictured on one of the tarot cards as waiting. Sharon Tate was left hanging in the number 12 tarot card's hangman position from the house rafters. The best therapists will quietly admit that traditional therapy is inadequate. Unless God intervenes, people who are born into the Illuminati don't escape it while alive. This book isn't a mere exercise of academic thinking, but is written with the assurance that freedom is possible. There are viable answers. Some children live in foster homes, or with adopted parents, or in orphanages, or with caretakers and guardians. Because these children are at the mercy of the non-related adults, these types of children frequently are sold to become mind-controlled slaves of the intelligence agencies. In review, remember that because many of these organizations are controlled by the Illuminati, an Illuminati slave may often work for one of these front groups, while the Illuminati maintain control over the base program. The intelligence networks were started by and run by the Illuminati. They are Illuminati fronts. The use of slaves crosses many organizational boundaries within the overall 25 network. If a slave is to be used as a Delta model assassination, they may be selected for strength and dexterity. The Delta Force is the Army's elite unit made up of monarch slaves. If they are to operate as a Beta model sexual slave, they will be chosen if they can master technique. Occasionally they might in some circumstances be selected for how pretty the programmers expect the child to become. Some parents have produced good-looking children and are actually sought after to bear children to sell into the mind-controlled slavery freedom train system. However, vastly more important for beta sex slaves are their ability to be programmed to have charm, seductive skills, charisma, and creativity. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and the programmers can put almost any kind of body to use as a sex slave. Almost any sex slave can fit somewhere into the scripts of the Illuminati New World Order crime syndicate porn movies. I place porn in quotation marks, because what they call porn doesn't resemble what the public thinks of porn. We're not talking Playboy-type porn, we're talking ghastly horrible atrocities that are as sick as anything done in the Nazi concentration camps. For instance, it takes little acting ability or beauty to have one's head chopped off while having sex. There are different types of sexual slaves, but the Illuminati wants to get beta alters which are sharp, talented, skilled, and resourceful. They will use these beta alters, such as the Black Widow alters, for espionage and blackmail. To make sure that the child's mind develops properly, the baby will be interacted with so that those areas of the brain that are important to develop will develop to the maximum. It is a well-known fact that areas of the brain grow according to how much stimulation and use that area of the brain receives. For this reason, grande dames, who are involved in programming, will spend time drawing and showing faces to the child and seeing if the child can recognize identical faces. Almost any other item will be used. Candy canes with stripes. Match the candy canes with the same no of stripes, trees, or pencils. The child must learn to match identical items very early, even before they can speak. This is so they will be able to build mirror images into their mind. 26. Chapter 2 Science to the traumatization and torture of the victim. The basis for the success of the monarch mind control programming is that different personalities or personality parts called alters can be created who do not know each other, but who can take the body at different times. The amnesia walls that are built by traumas form a protective shield of secrecy that protects the abusers from being found out, and prevents the front personalities who hold the body much of the time to know how their system of alters is being used. The shield of secrecy allows cult members to live and work around other people and remain totally undetected. The front alters can be wonderful Christians, and the deeper alters can be the worst type of satanic monster imaginable, a Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde effect. A great deal is at stake in maintaining the secrecy of the intelligence agency or the occult group which is controlling the slave. The success rate of this type of programming is high, but when it fails, the failures are discarded through death. Each trauma and torture serves a purpose. A great deal of experimentation and research went into finding out what can and can't be done. Charts were made showing how much torture a given body weight at a given age can handle without death. Now this is why the Nazis did all those strange concentration camp experiments, where they tested how quickly people would freeze or die from various traumas. It was for mind control. The abusers are very specific and scientific in their torture. A lab technician with a clipboard walks around monitoring the for the children when they receive their initial traumas. Heart monitors are closely watched. Still many children died from the programming. The programmers learned that when a child rolled up in a fetal position it had given up the will to live. They learned to time how fast this would occur to get an idea how far to push the child. 27. Parents in eastern United States were taken to Harvard University for training to teach them how much trauma they could give their children at home before they would die. After the children got back from their initial programming they were to receive daily traumas to keep them dissociative. The initial splites and initial programming done at China Lake, CA. The primary or initial torture for many children in western US was done at China Lake, which officially has gone under the designations Naval Ordnance Test Station, pronounced in short as NOTS, Naval Weapons Center, NWC, Ridgecrest, the town nearby, and in Ukern, the area. The address of Nimitz Hospital is the Code 232 Naval Air Weapons Station. The base was set up to test new weapons. Evidently, the Navy decided that mind-controlled people were an important weapon to test. Most of the new weapons created at China Lake were for the most part human robots turned out in large numbers. The Monarch mind control was carried out in large airplane hangars on the base which have been able to house thousands of tiny cages just large enough for human babies. Lots of 1,000 babies was a small batch. According to people who worked in the hangars helping program, many batches were 2,000 or 3,000 babies. Many survivors remembered the thousands of cages housing little children from ceiling to floor. The cages were hot-wired, electrified on the ceiling, bottom and sides, so that the children who are locked inside can receive horrific electric shocks to their bodies to groom their minds to split into multiple personalities. These cages are called woodpecker grids. The victim sees a flash of light when high DC voltage is applied. Later, this flash of light is used with hypnotic induction to make the person think they are going into another dimension when they are blasted with high voltage. In the Peter Pan programming, the programmers tell the slaves that this is writing the light. One of the popular traumas after the small child has endured the woodpecker grid cages for days is to rape it. The rape is intentionally brutal so that it will be as traumatic as possible. Many of the technical people on the base are civilians. This is in part because part of the research involves mind control, and Illuminati civilian mind control. 28. Experts have come and gone from the base. The California Institute of Technology of Pasadena is intimately connected to China Lake's research, and by the way to the Illuminati. Also much of the work at the facility is for the intelligence agencies and not the military. Intelligence assets are often civilians. One of the things developed in the California universities and then implemented at China Lake was color programming, which will be covered later in this book. Red and green were discovered to be the most visible colors for programming. Various colored flashing lights were used in programming at NOTS. Survivors of the programming all remember flashing lights. The use of flashing lights has been introduced into American culture by the CIA. If a person goes into bars and places where bands play, you will notice multicolored lights flashing. The flashing lights create disassociation, especially in people who are programmed. How children are transported to a major programming site. A list of major programming centers is given in an appendix, along with each site's programming specialties. In this chapter, an example of just one of the bases used for early programming is given, the large and very secret China Lake facility in California near Death Valley. The children are brought into the China Lake NWC, also known as NOTS, base by trains, planes and cars. A number of the small airfields which fly these children into China Lake have been identified. One, which is no longer in use for moving children, was a private airstrip at CHARADE, or which was beside a large lumber mill. The lumber mill had an agreement to secretly house the children who had their mouths tapped. Neighbors in the area were butt off and warned that if they talked there would be in trouble for broaching national security. The area has lots of mills joined by train tracks, which were used to shuttle the children around. Tied into this network was a Catholic monastery which lies between Sheridan and McMinnville, close to the rail network. The Union train station in Portland, or has underground tunnels where children were temporarily warehoused in cages before continuing on their journey. The Jesuits were active in this part of the child procurement. Catholic adoption agencies, which are many, nuns who get pregnant, Third 29, world parents, and parents who will sell their children were all sources of children for programming. When one thinks about how many corrupt people there are and how many towns and cities are on the West Coast, and how many children are produced by satanic breeders, illegal aliens and other parents who'd rather have the money than children, the reader begins to realize how procuring batches of 1,000 or 2,000 children was no problem for the Illuminati working through intelligence agencies such as the CIA, NISH, DIA, FBI, and FEMA. The Finders, a joint CFB group, procured children for the network for years. Some of the children needed for programming are to be used for sacrifices to traumatize those being programmed. The names of some of the people who work at procuring children for programming sacrifice have been released in FRITZ Springmeier's monthly newsletter. The secret FEMA airstrip at Santa Rosa has planes landing and leaving all night. Some of these flights go east and then land at the secret 1,800 square mile China Lake Naval Research Base, and are believed to carry children for programming. This airstrip is called the Santa Rosa Air Center. When I tried to get FAA information on this airstrip, they played stupid as if it didn't exist, yet it is in operation. Near Santa Rosa is the Bohemian Grove. Southwest of Santa Rosa is this air center which is not used by the public. This airport was recently used by private pilots as a FBO. It was built during WW2 as a training base for P-32 pilots, and deactivated in 1952. After the war, it was leased to private companies, such as the CIA. The paved areas are 4 feet of concrete and can land the heaviest planes in use. There are no buildings over 2 stories in the entire area, and no control tower. The FBI have a contingent in the federal building downtown Santa Rosa, and FEMA has a radio station at the airport. The Army Reserve also has some buildings in the area. However, there is some highly secret activity going on underground at the airport. 6-7 small planes sneak out of the closed base a day, and for a base of its description that is closed, that is very interesting. 30. The planes take off in the evening and do not turn their lights on until hundreds of feet into the air. The Press-Democrat of Santa Rosa ran an article on Thursday, April 22, 1993 about the federal government selling 70 acres of property just to the east of the airport. However, when one reads closely, the land is going to be offered to a host of federal agencies. The property was being used by FEMA, 707-542-4534. If one thinks about it, it is unlikely that the radio station is a FEMA transmitter station. The close vicinity of this secret activity to the elite's Bohemian Grove makes this an interesting site for study. The airport used for the Bohemian Grove visitors is north of Santa Rosa on HWY 101, the Sonoma County Airport. United Express and American Eagle, which flies to and from San Jose, fly into this airport, which has a controlled tower. In 1964, the airport was reported to have also carried about 600 military operations, either a takeoff or a landing, per year. It was around this time that the federal government made an agreement with Sonoma County Airport to help pay for the runway to be extended, the runway to be strengthened, and the airport to be upgraded in numerous ways. The elite from around the world fly into here to go to the Bohemian Grove, which is in the Monte Rio area. Monarch slaves are regularly abused at the Grove for the entertainment of Bohemian Grove members in kinky sex theme rooms, such as the Dark Room and the Necrophilia Room. Secret NWO outer business is conducted in the small, dark lounge with a wooden sign naming it Underground. Slaves are hunted in the woods for sport, and occult rituals, including infant sacrifice, are held outdoors in the Grove. These airfields are described in detail so that the reader can begin to catch on to the network of small planes and airfields the Monarch system uses to transport children. The children are trickled in from various collection points to China Lake. Monarch slaves, many of them children themselves, are used in this extensive child procurement system. Children are also used to entice and kidnap other children. Teenage slaves are used to escort and transport little children on trains, buses, and planes. 31. The triangular-shaped airfield at China Lake has traditionally begun very early in the morning with lots of activity. The night flights from FEMA Santa Rosa Airfield